She was doing everything right. Morning devotions. Check church on Sunday. Check serving on 3 committees. Check praying for everyone who asked. Check, but somewhere between the list and the life, she stopped breathing. Not literally, but spiritually. She was running on fumes, smiling through exhaustion, and wondering why God felt 1,000 miles away. At 58, she finally hit the wall. And in that moment of complete collapse, she heard it, the verse she'd read 100 times but never really heard. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. This video is for every woman over 50 who's been doing all the right things but feels spiritually empty. Because what if burnout isn't the end of your faith story? What if it's the beginning of the most restful, restored season you've ever known? She couldn't remember the last time she woke up feeling rested. Not just physically tired, though that was real too, but tired in her bones. Tired in her spirit. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. She'd scroll through her phone at 6 a.m., already feeling behind before her feet hit the floor. The to-do list was endless. Family needs, church obligations, work deadlines, aging parents, grandkids' schedules. And somehow, she'd become the person everyone called when they needed something. Because she always said yes. Because that's what faithful women do, right? They show up, they serve, they don't complain. But the truth no one was saying. She was running on empty. And here's what makes it so isolating. You can't really talk about it. Because if you say, I'm exhausted from serving God, people look at you like you've lost your faith. Like somehow, if you were really surrendered, you wouldn't be tired. So you keep going, you keep smiling, you keep saying yes when your body is screaming no. And you start to believe that this is just what the second half of life looks like: duty without delight. Service without strength, faith without fire. You tell yourself it's a season. You tell yourself it'll get better. But deep down, you're starting to wonder if this is just it. But here's what she didn't know yet. What you might not know yet. Running on empty isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're overdue for something God's been trying to give you all along. Because Jesus didn't say, come to me when you've got it all together. He said, come to me when you're weary, when you're burdened, when you've been carrying more than you were ever meant to carry. And the invitation isn't to do more, it's to finally rest. Tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to do something radical. Write down everything you're carrying, not just the tasks, the weights, the emotional labor, the unspoken expectations, the roles you've taken on that were never yours to carry. Write them all down. Don't edit. Don't minimize. Just name them. Because you can't lay down what you won't acknowledge. And what you're about to discover is that most of what you're carrying, God never asked you to pick it up in the first place. And here's what you need to know before we go any further. The exhaustion you're feeling isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that you're human. And the God who created you with limits isn't disappointed that you have them. He's been waiting for you to finally honor them. Because rest isn't rebellion, it's obedience. And what comes next is going to show you how to find it. She still prayed. Every morning, like clockwork. Same chair, same Bible, same routine she'd followed for 30 years. But somewhere along the way, it had become mechanical. She'd read a chapter, check the box, move on to the next thing. Prayers became lists. Help Sarah with her job, heal mom's hip, bless the missionary family. All good things, all necessary things, but not a conversation, not a connection, just maintenance. And the worst part, she couldn't even pinpoint when it happened. When did intimacy become obligation? When did worship become work? Sunday mornings were the hardest. She'd sit in the pew, singing songs she'd sung 1,000 times, and feel absolutely nothing. The words were right. The theology was sound, but her heart, it was numb. She'd look around at everyone else, hands raised, eyes closed, fully present, and wonder what was wrong with her. Why can't I feel anything? Am I broken? Have I grieved the Holy Spirit? And the shame of it kept her silent. Because how do you tell your small group that you're spiritually flatlined when they're all talking about breakthrough and favor? So you fake it. You nod along. You say, God is good, and hope no one asks you to elaborate. But here's the truth that's going to set you free. God isn't offended by your autopilot. He's grieved that you think he requires it. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that faithfulness means consistency at all costs. That if you miss a quiet time, you've failed. That if you don't feel God's presence, it's because you didn't try hard enough. But that's not scripture. That's performance. And Jesus didn't die to give you a productivity system for spiritual life. He died to give you himself. Fully, freely, without the checklist. Here's what I want you to try for the next 3 days. Skip the routine. I know that sounds scandalous, but stay with me. Instead of your normal morning quiet time, just sit. Literally just sit. No Bible plan. No prayer list. Just you and God in a room, with nothing to prove and nothing to produce. And if it feels awkward, that's okay. If your mind wanders, that's okay. If you spend 15 minutes in silence and feel like nothing happened, that's okay too. Because what you're doing isn't failing, you're detoxing from performance. And God, he's already there, waiting for you to stop performing and start receiving. And here's what's about to happen. When you stop trying so hard to do faith, you're going to remember how to be with God. Not because you earned it, not because you fixed yourself, but because he's been there the whole time, waiting for you to put down the clipboard and just breathe. And that breath, that's where everything starts to change. No one at church knew. She showed up on time, dressed well, greeted people warmly. She volunteered in the nursery, brought snacks for Bible study, signed up for the prayer chain. From the outside, she looked like the picture of a thriving believer. But inside, she was collapsing. And the gap between what people saw and what she felt was getting wider every week. It's exhausting to live in two worlds, to be the strong one everyone leans on while you're barely holding yourself together. But that's the role she'd been playing for so long, she didn't know how to stop. And here's the cruelest part. Church, the place that should be a refuge, had become another place to perform. Because when you're known as the woman who has it all together, you can't suddenly fall apart. People wouldn't know what to do with that. They'd be concerned, sure. They'd pray for you. But they'd also be uncomfortable. Because your breakdown would mean theirs is possible too. So you keep the mask on. You say I'm blessed when they ask how you're doing. Even though what you want to say is I'm barely surviving. And every Sunday, the smile gets a little harder to hold. But let me tell you something that might change everything. Your honesty won't scandalize God's people. It will heal them. Because there are a dozen other women sitting in that same sanctuary, wearing the same smile, carrying the same secret exhaustion, and they're all waiting for someone to be brave enough to say it out loud. I'm tired, I'm burned out, and I don't have this figured out. Because vulnerability doesn't weaken the body of Christ, it strengthens it. It gives other people permission to stop pretending. And that permission, it's a gift. This week, I want you to practice one sentence of honesty. Not with everyone, with one safe person. Someone who's earned your trust. And when they ask how you're doing, don't say fine. Say the truth. I'm struggling. I'm exhausted. I don't feel close to God right now. It doesn't have to be a full breakdown. Just one honest sentence. Because the moment you stop hiding, you create space for healing. And the relief you feel, that's the Holy Spirit saying, finally, now we can work. And here's what you need to understand. The Sunday smile isn't protecting your witness. It's strangling it. Because people don't connect with perfection, they connect with truth. And the most powerful testimony you can give isn't I have it all together. It's I fell apart, and God met me there. And that story, it's about to become yours. It happened on a Wednesday. Not a special day. Not a particularly hard day. Just Wednesday. She was folding laundry whites, like always, and something inside her just gave. Not dramatic, not loud. She just set the towel down, sat on the floor, and started crying. Not the kind of crying you can control. The kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed. And once it started, it wouldn't stop. She cried for the exhaustion, for the loneliness, for the years of performing, for the God she used to feel close to but couldn't find anymore. And when the tears finally slowed, she was left with the most terrifying thing: silence. But here's what she didn't know in that moment, what you might not know in yours. Collapse isn't failure, it's surrender. It's the moment when your body finally refuses to carry what your spirit wasn't meant to hold. And God, He wasn't absent in that breakdown. He was present. Because sometimes, He lets us hit the wall so we'll finally stop climbing it. Sometimes, the only way to hear His voice is when ours goes quiet. And that Wednesday afternoon, sitting on the floor, with mascara-stained cheeks and no strength left to pretend that was the holiest moment she'd had in years. Write this down and put it somewhere you'll see it. God is not afraid of my breaking. He's been waiting for it. Because breakthrough doesn't come from holding it together. It comes from finally admitting you can't. And when you stop trying to be strong enough, that's when you discover that His strength was always enough. That's when rest stops being a concept and starts being a lifeline. If this first insight spoke to you, if you're realizing that maybe, just maybe, burnout isn't the end, but the beginning, subscribe now so you don't miss the journey ahead. Because what comes next is going to show you how that moment of collapse became the doorway to the most restful, restored season of her life. And it can be yours too. She wasn't looking for a sign. She'd stopped looking for anything, honestly. But the next morning, when she opened her Bible more out of habit than hope, her eyes landed on Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. She'd read it before, memorized it even. But this time, it was like the words bypassed her brain and went straight to her chest. Come to me, not work harder for me, not prove yourself to me. Come. And that word, that simple, gentle invitation, it broke something open. Because here's what she realized in that moment. She'd been coming to everything else, coming to her responsibilities, coming to other people's expectations, coming to her own standards of what a good Christian woman should be. But she hadn't come to Him. Not really. Not without an agenda. Not without trying to fix herself first. She'd been treating Jesus like a vending machine insert. The right prayers get the right blessings instead of a person who actually wanted to be with her. Not for what she could do, just for who she was, tired, burned out, empty. And somehow, that was exactly the invitation He was offering. Jesus didn't say, come to me when you've rested up and you're ready to serve again. He said, come to me because you're weary. Your exhaustion isn't disqualifying you, it's the exact reason the invitation exists. And rest isn't something you have to earn through better time management or stronger boundaries. Rest is a person. It's Jesus. And He's not waiting for you to get your life together before He offers it. He's offering it now, today, in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the burnout, right where you are. Find Matthew 11:28 in your Bible, not on your phone, in an actual Bible. If you have one, underline it, highlight it, write today's date next to it, and then write this in the margin. Lord, I'm coming. Not because I'm ready, because I'm desperate. Because desperation isn't weakness. It's the posture that finally receives. And when you stop trying to come to God impressive and start coming to Him honest, that's when rest stops being theoretical and starts being real. And here's what you need to carry into the next chapter. That verse wasn't random. It was rescue. God wasn't scolding her for being tired. He was inviting her home. And if you're reading this right now, bone tired and wondering if you'll ever feel alive again, that invitation, it's for you too. And it's about to change everything. The hardest part wasn't admitting she was burned out. It was letting go of all the things that burned her out in the first place. Because when you've built your identity around being needed, saying no feels like betrayal. She looked at her calendar: Bible study leader, nursery volunteer, meal train coordinator, prayer chain manager, and realized that none of these were bad things. They were good things. Kingdom things. But somewhere along the way, good things had become the enemy of the best thing. And the best thing, it was sitting with Jesus. Without an agenda. Without trying to earn her keep. But here's the lie she'd been believing, the one you might be believing too. If I step back, everything will fall apart. The ministry will suffer. People will be disappointed. God will be disappointed. So you keep showing up, keep saying yes, keep pushing through the exhaustion, because you've convinced yourself that faithfulness means never stopping. But let me ask you something. What if the most faithful thing you could do right now is stop? What if God is more interested in your wholeness than your productivity? What if He's been trying to get your attention for months, maybe years, and burnout is His mercy, not His punishment? Exodus 22:8 says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy." Not if you have time, not when things slow down. Remember, as in, you're going to forget. You're going to get so busy doing things for God that you forget to be with God. And Sabbath isn't just a day, it's a posture. It's the rhythm of work and rest, effort and surrender, striving and receiving. And when you violate that rhythm long enough, your body will force you to stop. Which is exactly what happened to her. The burnout wasn't random. It was an intervention. Here's your practice and I know this is going to be hard. Pick one thing on your list and let it go. Not forever, just for this season. Maybe it's a committee you've been on for 5 years. Maybe it's hosting the small group when you don't have the bandwidth. Maybe it's being the go-to person for every crisis. Whatever it is, write it down. Then pray this simple prayer. God, I'm laying this down. If it's yours, you'll sustain it. If it's not, let it go. And then this is the hard part actually, let it go. Don't pick it back up out of guilt. Trust that God is bigger than your absence. And here's what's going to happen. When you create space, God will fill it. Not with more tasks, with Himself. And that presence, it's going to feel like water in a desert. Because you've been so busy working for Him, you forgot what it feels like to just be with Him. And that's where rest lives. She'd heard the word Sabbath her whole life. Sundays were for church, obviously. But beyond that, it was just another day to catch up on laundry, answer emails, plan the week ahead. Rest felt like something you did when everything else was finished. And since everything was never finished, rest never happened. But now, sitting in the wreckage of her burnout, she started to wonder, what if I've been getting this wrong the whole time? What if Sabbath isn't about what I do, it's about who I am? Because here's the revelation that changed everything for her. Sabbath is relationship, not ritual. It's not about following a rule, it's about remembering you're loved. It's God saying, you don't have to earn today. I already gave it to you. And when you really let that sink in, it dismantles the entire performance system you've been running on. Because if you're already loved, if there's nothing you can do to make God love you more, and nothing you can do to make Him love you less, then rest isn't laziness. It's trust. It's saying, God, you're God, and I'm not. And that's okay. She started small. One morning, a week Saturday, before the chaos of Sunday, she decided to do nothing. No to-do list. No errands. No productivity. Just being. The first time it felt wrong, wasteful, even. Her mind kept racing. You should be doing something. There's so much to do. This is selfish. But she stayed with it. She sat on her back porch with coffee and no agenda. She listened to the birds. She prayed, not interceding for everyone else, but just talking to God like a friend. And something shifted. Not dramatic, not instant, but real. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still, and know that I am God." Not do more, and you'll figure out that I'm God. Be still, which means the knowing comes through the stillness, not through the striving. And that's countercultural, right? Because everything in our world says you have to do to be. But God says the opposite. You have to be to truly do. You have to rest in who you are before you can work from who you are. And when you reverse that order, you end up exactly where she was, burned out, exhausted, and spiritually empty. And here's the funny thing about learning Sabbath. It's awkward at first, like really awkward. You don't know what to do with yourself. You sit there thinking, okay, I'm resting. Am I doing it right? Should I feel something? Is this working? And then you realize you're treating rest like another task to accomplish, which completely defeats the point. So you laugh at yourself a little. You give yourself grace. You remember that you're unlearning decades of hustle. And that doesn't happen in one Saturday morning, but you keep showing up, keep practicing, keep choosing the porch over the to-do list. And slowly, the awkward becomes holy. The stillness becomes sacred. And rest stops being something you do and starts being something you receive. This week, schedule one Sabbath morning. Put it on your calendar like it's a doctor's appointment, because honestly, it is. It's an appointment with the great physician for your soul. And during that morning, do one thing that delights you without producing anything. Read for pleasure, sit in your garden, take a slow walk with no destination, paint, journal, nap, for heaven's sake. Whatever it is, do it without guilt. Because you're not wasting time, you're remembering time. You're remembering that you were made for more than productivity. You were made for presence, and presence with God. That's where everything begins. And here's the promise. When you start honoring Sabbath, real Sabbath, not the fake version where you're still mentally working something, and your spirit starts to heal. The frantic pace slows, the anxiety quiets, and you start to remember what it feels like to live from rest instead of running toward it. And that rhythm, it changes everything. The first real Sabbath was messy. She planned to spend the morning in rest, but her mind had other plans. 20 minutes in, she was mentally running through the grocery list. 40 minutes in, she remembered an email she forgot to send. An hour in, she felt guilty for not being productive. And that's when she realized, this is going to take practice. Because her nervous system had been in fight or flight mode for so long, stillness felt dangerous. Like if she stopped moving, something terrible would happen. But nothing terrible happened. The world kept spinning, the tasks kept waiting, and she kept sitting. And here's what she learned that first imperfect Sabbath. Rest isn't about getting it right. It's about showing up anyway. Because the enemy of rest isn't busyness, it's perfectionism. It's the belief that if you can't do it perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. But God isn't grading your Sabbath. He's just inviting you into it. Messy, distracted, imperfect, it all counts. Because what He cares about isn't your performance in rest. He cares about your presence in rest. And every time you choose to sit when everything in you wants to run, you're retraining your soul to trust Him. Mark 2:27 says, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath," which means rest is a gift, not a law. It's not one more thing to do right, it's the thing that reminds you you're already loved. And when you approach it with that posture, suddenly the pressure's off. You don't have to perform rest, you just receive it, imperfectly, awkwardly, gratefully. And over time, the receiving gets easier. The guilt quiets. And the rest starts to feel less like rebellion and more like coming home. Here's what I want you to do after your first inevitably imperfect Sabbath. Write down one thing you noticed, not what you did wrong. What you noticed. Maybe you noticed the sound of rain. Maybe you noticed how tired you actually are. Maybe you noticed that God felt closer in the stillness than He has in months. Write it down, because those notices, they're breadcrumbs. They're God saying, keep coming, there's more here. And when you look back 6 months from now, you'll see how those small, imperfect Sabbaths built something you couldn't have built through striving. They built rest, real, sustainable, soul-deep rest. If this is resonating, if you're realizing that maybe burnout was the mercy that brought you here, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Because we're about to move from recognizing the problem to rebuilding the solution. And what she discovers in the silence, it's going to change not just her schedule, but her entire relationship with God. She'd been afraid of the silence, afraid of what she might hear, or worse, what she might not hear. But on her third Sabbath morning, something happened. She was sitting in her chair, no agenda, no Bible study plan, just her and God. And in that quiet, beneath the noise of her thoughts, she heard it. Not an audible voice. Not a lightning bolt revelation. Just a gentle whisper, like a thought that wasn't hers. I've missed you. And tears came. Because she'd been so busy serving God, she'd forgotten He actually wanted to be with her. Not her productivity. Not her perfect prayers. Just her. Here's what happens when you finally stop talking long enough to listen. You realize God's been speaking all along. You just couldn't hear him over the noise of your own striving. Because intimacy with God doesn't happen at 70 miles per hour. It happens in the stillness, in the space between the tasks, in the moments when you're not trying to impress him or fix yourself or prove you're worthy. It happens when you finally exhale and say, I don't have anything to offer you today except myself. And I don't even know if that's enough. Single quotes, and he whispers back, it's more than enough. It's what I wanted all along. 1 Kings 19:12 tells the story of Elijah, exhausted and burned out, hiding in a cave. And God didn't show up in the earthquake or the fire or the mighty wind. He showed up in a still, small voice, which means the way God most often speaks isn't through the spectacular, it's through the subtle. And if your life is so loud that you can't hear subtle, you're going to miss him. Not because he's not speaking, but because you're not listening. And listening requires something our culture hates: slowness, stillness, space. Try this for the next week. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit somewhere quiet, no phone, no book, no distractions, and just be. Don't try to pray eloquently. Don't try to hear something profound. Just sit with God like you'd sit with a friend. And if nothing happens, that's okay. Because what you're doing is training your soul to be comfortable in his presence without needing to perform. You're learning to just be with him. And over time, in that being, you'll start to hear what you've been missing all along. Not instructions, not to-do lists, just him and his presence. It's better than any answer. And here's the shift that's happening. She's moving from doing for God to being with God, and that shift, it's not just changing her quiet times, it's changing her entire life. Because when you learn to hear God in the stillness, you start recognizing his voice in the chaos. And that recognition becomes your anchor in every season. Not just burnout. Every season. The first time she said no, it felt like heresy. A friend called asking her to coordinate the church bake sales, something she'd done for 5 years running. And for the first time, she said, I can't this year. Not I'm too busy, which would imply she'd do it if she had time. Just I can't. And the silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Her friend recovered quickly. Oh, okay, no problem. But she could hear the confusion underneath. Because this wasn't the woman they knew. The woman they knew always said yes. And here's what no one tells you about setting boundaries. At first, it feels selfish, unkind, even. You've spent so long being available, accommodating, flexible, that when you finally draw a line, it feels like you're letting everyone down. But here's the truth. A boundary isn't a rejection. It's protection. It's you saying, I only have so much to give, and I'm going to steward it wisely. And if people are upset by your boundaries, that's not your problem to fix. Because healthy people respect boundaries, and unhealthy people, they'll always ask you to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. But God doesn't. Jesus modeled this perfectly. In Mark 1:35-37, he's in the middle of a massive ministry movement. People are being healed, demons are being cast out, and the disciples come to him saying, everyone is looking for you. And you know what Jesus does? He says, let's go somewhere else. He withdraws. He rests. He says no to good things because he knows his assignment. And if Jesus said no, then you can too. Not because you're selfish. Because you're wise. Because you understand that saying yes to everything means saying yes to burnout. And God didn't call you to burnout. He called you to fruitfulness. And fruitfulness requires pruning. Here's your practice. Identify one request you would normally say yes to out of guilt or obligation, and say no. Not with a long explanation, not with over-apologizing, just a kind, clear no. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not able to take that on right now. That's it. Don't justify. Don't defend. Just honor your limit. And then this is crucial, don't fill that space with something else. Let it stay empty. Let it be Sabbath space. Because every no to the wrong thing is a yes to the right thing. And the right thing? It's rest. It's healing. It's rebuilding your capacity to actually hear God. And I want to hear from you. What's the one yes you need to turn into a no? Drop it in the comments. Because naming it publicly gives you accountability. And seeing other women name theirs will remind you that you're not alone in this. We're all learning to honor our limits. And that's not failure, it's faithfulness. She'd lived by a motto for most of her adult life. Work hard, trust God, and it'll all work out. And it sounded spiritual. It sounded like faith, but underneath it was a belief system she didn't even realize she had. God helps those who help themselves. Which isn't scripture. By the way, it's Benjamin Franklin. But she'd believed it so deeply that rest felt like laziness and margin felt like irresponsibility. If there was time in the day, it should be filled with something productive. And if she wasn't exhausted by bedtime, she hadn't worked hard enough. That was the hustle, and it nearly killed her. But here's what God was teaching her in the stillness. Grace doesn't run on the same system as hustle. Hustle says, earn it. Grace says, receive it. Hustle says, prove your worth. Grace says, you're already worthy. Hustle says, rest when it's over. Grace says, rest is part of the work. And the shift from hustle to grace isn't just a schedule change, it's a heart change. It's learning to move from a place of enoughness instead of striving toward it. It's believing that God's love for you isn't tied to your productivity. And that belief, it changes everything. Okay, pause the video right now. I'm serious. Pause it. Because I want you to ask yourself one question, and I want you to answer it out loud, even if you're alone. What am I trying to earn from God through my busyness? Is it His approval, His love, His favor? Is it significance, security, proof that you matter? Say it out loud, because you can't dismantle a belief system you won't name. And hustle. It's always trying to earn something. Grace says you already have it. Now press play. Ephesians 2:28-29 says, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." And if salvation isn't earned through works, then why do we think rest is? Why do we believe we have to deserve margin, earn Sabbath, qualify for peace? We don't. It's already given. The question is, will you receive it? Or will you keep trying to earn what's already yours? For the next 7 days, every time you feel the urge to hustle, to fill the quiet, to add one more thing to the list, to prove your worth through productivity, stop and say this out loud. Grace is already mine. I don't have to earn today. Say it as many times as you need to. Because reprogramming decades of hustle doesn't happen overnight. But every time you choose grace over striving, you're rewiring your soul. And over time, rest stops feeling like rebellion and starts feeling like worship. And here's the promise. When you start moving from grace instead of hustling toward it, your work doesn't decrease in quality, it increases. Because you're no longer working from empty. You're working from overflow. And work from overflow. It's sustainable. It's joyful. It's actually fruitful. Not just productive. Fruitful. And there's a difference. She started noticing small things. The way morning light hit her kitchen counter. The sound of her husband's laugh, freely heard it for the first time in years. The taste of her coffee instead of just drinking it on autopilot. And she realized, she'd been moving so fast, she'd stopped noticing her own life. She'd been so busy getting to the next thing that she'd missed this thing. And this thing, this moment, this breath, this ordinary Tuesday, it was sacred. She just hadn't been slow enough to see it. Healing doesn't happen at hustle speed. It happens in the slow, in the small, in the ordinary moments when you're finally present enough to notice what's been there all along. And what she was discovering in the slowness wasn't just peace, it was herself. The version of her that wasn't performing. The version that didn't need to be impressive or indispensable. The version God created before the world taught her she had to earn her place in it. And that woman, she was beautiful. She was enough. And she'd been buried under years of striving. Psalm 23:22-23 says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul." Single quotes. Notice it doesn't say He leads us beside rushing rivers or roaring rapids. Quiet waters. Because restoration happens in the quiet, in the slow, in the stillness that hustle culture calls wasteful, but God calls holy. And when you finally let yourself be led there, when you stop resisting the slowness, your soul starts to heal in ways you didn't even know it needed. This week, do one thing slowly, not because you have to, but because you're practicing presence. Drink your coffee without checking your phone. Take a walk without a destination. Cook dinner without rushing. And as you do, pay attention. Notice, because what you're doing isn't wasting time, you're reclaiming it. You're remembering that life isn't a race to the finish line. It's a series of sacred moments. And the more you slow down, the more of them you'll catch. We're halfway through. If these truths are helping you, subscribe and stay connected. Because what's coming next is where everything shifts. You've recognized the burnout. You've learned to rest. And now we rebuild. From a place of wholeness instead of exhaustion. And what she becomes in the second half of this story, it's going to take your breath away. It happened at the grocery store, of all places. She was reaching for a carton of eggs when a toddler in the next aisle let out the most joyful, unhinged giggle she'd ever heard. And without thinking, she laughed too. Not a polite chuckle, a real, full-body laugh. And then she stopped, stunned, because she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that. Not at something funny someone said. Not a social laugh, but a laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep, unplanned and unforced. And in that moment, in the middle of the cereal aisle, she realized, joy is coming back. Here's what burnout steals that you don't notice until it's gone. Delight. The capacity to be surprised by goodness, to find something funny without analyzing why, to feel lightness without guilt. Because when you're running on empty, everything is heavy. Every conversation is a weight. Every task is a burden. Even good things feel hard. But as she'd been practicing rest, real rest, Sabbath rest, something was shifting. The heaviness was lifting, and what was rising in its place wasn't just relief, it was joy. Not manufactured joy, not forced gratitude, just joy. Pure, unearned, bubbling up from the soul. Joy. Nehemiah Gem de Lapen Lewat Sapulamanit says, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." Not the hustle of the Lord. Not the productivity of the Lord. The joy. Which means joy isn't a bonus feature of faith, it's the fuel. It's what sustains you when everything else runs out. And when you lose your joy, you don't just lose happiness. You lose strength. You lose resilience. You lose the very thing that makes the Christian life sustainable. But here's the good news. Joy isn't gone forever. It's just buried under burnout. And as you rest, as you heal, as you make space, it comes back. Slowly, unexpectedly. But it comes back. Pay attention this week to moments of unexpected joy. The kind you don't manufacture or schedule. A good song on the radio. A hug from your grandkid. A perfect sunset. And when you notice it, pause. Say out loud, "Thank you, God." Not as a ritual, as a recognition. Because joy is God's way of saying, "You're healing. Keep going." And every small delight is a breadcrumb leading you back to wholeness. Follow them. And here's what's happening. She's not just recovering from burnout, she's being restored. And restoration doesn't just mean going back to how things were. It means becoming something better, something whole. And that wholeness, it includes laughter, it includes lightness, it includes joy. Because the God who created laughter isn't a God of grim duty. He's a God of delight. And He's giving it back to you, one unexpected moment at a time. For years, church had felt like a competition she didn't sign up for. Everyone seemed to have it together. Thriving marriages, obedient kids, impressive ministries, strong faith, and she'd sit in the pew feeling like a fraud. Like if they really knew how much she was struggling, they'd revoke her membership. So she kept the mask on, smiled, nodded, pretended. But in her healing, something shifted. She started being honest, not dramatic, just real. And when she finally said to a friend, "I've been burned out and I'm just now learning how to rest," something surprising happened. The friend said, "Me too." And then another woman overheard. And she said, "Me too." And suddenly, there were 6 women standing in the church lobby, all admitting they were exhausted, all confessing they'd been faking fine for years. And what started as one vulnerable confession became the most honest conversation any of them had had in a decade. Because vulnerability is contagious. When one person is brave enough to take off the mask, it gives everyone else permission to breathe. And what they discovered in that honesty wasn't judgment, it was relief. They weren't alone, they'd just been pretending they were. Galatians 6:2 says, "Carry each other's burdens. And in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." But you can't carry what you won't share, and you can't share what you're hiding. So when we all pretend to have it together, we rob each other of the very thing we need most, the knowledge that we're not alone in the struggle. And when she stopped comparing herself to everyone else's highlight reel and started being real about her behind the scenes, she found what she'd been looking for all along. True community. Not perfect, not impressive, just real. She started a small group, nothing fancy. Just 5 women meeting every other week, to be honest. No curriculum, no agenda, just coffee and truth. And the rule was simple: no performing, no fixing each other. Just showing up as you are. And what happened in that living room over the next few months was nothing short of holy. Women cried, women laughed, women admitted things they'd never said out loud. And in that space, healing happened. Not because anyone had the answers, but because they stopped pretending they did. And here's the funny thing about finding real community. It's awkward at first. Because we're so used to performing that when someone says, "Just be yourself," we panic. Wait, which self? The version I show at church? The version I am at home? The version I wish I was Ben? And then you realize that all those versions are exhausting, and maybe, just maybe, you can show up as the messy, tired, imperfect woman you actually are. And the relief of that. It's like taking off shoes that have been too tight for years. You didn't even realize how much they hurt until you finally took them off. And once you do, you're never putting them back on. This month, find one person you can be real with. Not your whole church, not your entire social media. One safe person. And practice honesty, not trauma dumping, just truth telling. I'm struggling with this. I'm tired. I don't have this figured out. And when you find that person who doesn't try to fix you or spiritualize your struggle, but just sits with you in it, hold on to them. Because that's the kind of friendship that heals. Not the kind that impresses. The kind that sustains and honors what's happening. She's learning that she doesn't have to be the strongest one in the room. She doesn't have to have all the answers. She doesn't have to be the example everyone looks to. She can just be her. Tired, healing, figuring it out. And that version, it's the one people actually connect with. Because perfection inspires from a distance. But honesty, it heals up close. 6 months into her healing, something unexpected happened. She wanted to serve again, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of genuine desire. A need arose at church: someone to coordinate meals for a family going through crisis, and instead of her usual dread, she felt a gentle pull. I could do that, not I should. Not everyone expects me to. Just, I could. And that difference, it was everything. Because for the first time in years, serving felt like an overflow, not a draining. She had something to give, not because she'd manufactured it, but because it had been given to her first. Here's the truth about sustainable ministry. You can't pour from an empty cup. Everyone says that. But here's what they don't say. You also can't pour from a cup that's only 20% full. Because even if there's something there, if you keep pouring without refilling, you'll still end up empty. And that's what she'd been doing for decades. Pouring at 20%. Serving from fumes. And wondering why she was so tired. But now, after months of Sabbath, rest, and healing, her cup wasn't just full, it was overflowing. And overflow. That's where real ministry happens. John 7:38 says, "Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them." Rivers, not trickles, not drips, rivers. Which means when you're connected to the source, there's an abundance. A flow that doesn't deplete you because it's not coming from you, it's coming through you. And the difference between serving from overflow and serving from empty is the difference between sustainable ministry and burnout. One gives life, the other steals it, and learning the difference. It's one of the most important things you'll ever do. Before you say yes to any new commitment, ask yourself this: am I serving from overflow or from empty? And here's how you know. If the thought of saying yes makes you feel alive, energized, excited, that's overflow. If the thought makes you feel obligated, anxious, or resentful, that's empty. And empty yeses don't honor God. They don't honor the people you're serving. And they don't honor you. So practice this. Only say yes when it's overflow. And if that means saying no to things you used to do, that's okay. Because God would rather have your wholehearted yes to one thing than your resentful yes to 10. And here's the promise. When you start serving from overflow instead of obligation, everything changes. Your work becomes worship. Your service becomes joyful. And the people you're serving, they feel the difference. Because they're not receiving your exhaustion, they're receiving your abundance. And that abundance, it's contagious. It multiplies. It becomes a testimony in itself. Because the world doesn't need more burned out Christians doing ministry. It needs rested, whole, overflow-filled people who are so connected to Jesus that rivers flow from them without effort. And that's who you're becoming. She woke up one morning and realized something had shifted. For the first time in years, she didn't wake up already exhausted. There was no dread, no mental list running before her eyes even opened, just peace, a quiet sense of I'm okay, not because everything was fixed, not because her schedule was magically easier, but because something inside her had been restored. And that something, it was spiritual energy. The capacity to engage with life, not just survive it, but actually engage with it. Fully present, fully alive. Here's what most people don't understand about burnout. It's not just physical. It's not just emotional. It's spiritual. It's a depletion that happens in your soul when you've been running on your own strength for too long. And you can sleep 8 hours, eat well, exercise, do all the self-care things and still be spiritually empty. Because spiritual energy doesn't come from managing your schedule better. It comes from abiding in Christ. And abiding isn't a technique. It's a relationship. It's staying connected to the source so that His life flows through you. And when that connection gets severed, not because God left, but because you stopped abiding, you run out, not of tasks, of life. John 15:5 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me you can do nothing, nothing, not, you'll do things poorly, nothing. Which means everything you've been doing in your own strength. It might look productive, but it's not bearing lasting fruit. Because fruit doesn't come from effort. It comes from connection. And the moment she started prioritizing connection over productivity, the moment she chose abiding over achieving, her spiritual energy started to return. Not in a burst, but in a steady, sustainable flow. Here's your practice for this week. Every morning, before you do anything else, spend 5 minutes consciously connecting to Jesus. Not reading about Him, not praying to Him, connecting with Him. Sit quietly and say, Jesus, I'm a branch. You're the vine. I can't do today without you. Flow through me. And then just sit. Let that truth settle. Because what you're doing isn't adding another task to your morning. You're remembering your power source. And when you start the day connected, everything else flows differently. Not easier, necessarily, but from a place of fullness instead of striving. And here's what's happening. She's not just recovering from burnout. She's being rebuilt. Her capacity is returning. Her joy is returning. Her strength is returning. But it's not the adrenaline-fueled white-knuckle strength she used to run on. It's the steady, sustainable, spirit-fueled strength that comes from abiding. And that strength, it doesn't run out. Because it's not hers, it's His. And His strength never fails. She never thought she'd be the kind of person who shared her story publicly. She was private, reserved. The kind of woman who listened to other people's testimonies but never imagined having one worth telling. But then a friend asked her to speak at a women's retreat, just 20 minutes, sharing what God had done in her life. And her first instinct was to say no, to deflect, to suggest someone with a more impressive story. But then she remembered, vulnerability heals. And if her breakthrough story could help even one woman, it was worth the discomfort. So she said yes. And on a Saturday morning, in front of 60 women she mostly didn't know, she told the truth. She told them about the burnout, the collapse, the years of performing, the Sunday smile that hid so much pain. And as she talked, she watched women's faces. Some were crying, some were nodding. And when she finished, the room was silent for a moment. And then a woman in the back raised her hand and said, "Thank you for saying what we've all been feeling." And just like that, 60 women exhaled, because they'd been given permission to stop pretending. And that permission, it changed the entire room. 2 Corinthians 1:2-3-4 says, "Praise be to the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." Which means your story isn't just for you. It's for the woman sitting next to you in church, who's one Sunday away from her own collapse. It's for your daughter who's watching and learning what faithfulness really looks like. It's for the stranger on the internet who stumbles across your words on the hardest night of her life and realizes she's not alone. Your story, messy, imperfect, still in progress, it matters. Not because it's impressive, because it's true. This week, share your story with one person. Not the polished version. The real one. The one where you admit you didn't have it all together. The one where you talk about the burnout, the breakdown, the slow healing. And as you share it, pay attention to what happens. Because what you'll find is that your honesty gives other people permission to be honest too. And that ripple effect. It's how healing spreads. One truthful conversation at a time. And I want to hear from you. What's one part of your story you've been afraid to share? Leave it in the comments. Not the whole thing, just one sentence. Because naming it publicly is the first step to owning it. And when you own your story, you take away its power to shame you. And that freedom, it's contagious. After the retreat, women started reaching out. At first, it was just coffee invitations. "Can we talk? I'm struggling with burnout too." Then it was emails, then phone calls. And she realized, the story she'd been embarrassed to tell, it had become her ministry. Not the ministry she planned, not the one she would have chosen, but the one God gave her when she finally stopped hiding. And it was more fulfilling than any committee she'd ever served on, because she wasn't performing anymore. She was just walking alongside women who were where she'd been. And that walking alongside, that's the purest form of ministry there is. So she started leading small, informal gatherings. Nothing official, no curriculum, just women in her living room, learning how to rest, learning how to honor their limits, learning how to hear God in the stillness. She called them Sabbath circles, and the rule was simple: no productivity, no fixing each other, just showing up, being honest, and practicing rest together. And what happened in those circles was holy. Women cried, women laughed. Women admitted they'd been faking fine for decades. And slowly, week by week, they started to heal. Not because she had all the answers, but because she'd been through it. And sometimes, the most powerful ministry isn't advice, it's presence. 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says, "And we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive, encourage the disheartened, help the weak, be patient with everyone." Encourage the disheartened, help the weak, not because you're strong, but because you remember being weak. And that memory, it makes you gentle. It makes you patient. It makes you the kind of person who doesn't judge other people's burnout because you know how close you were to your own collapse. And that empathy, it's the ministry the world needs most. Pause the video one more time. I want you to think about this. Who in your life right now is where you were a year ago, 2 years ago? Who's running on empty, hiding behind the Sunday smile, one bad day away from breaking? Can you see her face? Good. Now here's what I want you to do. Reach out to her this week, not to fix her, not to give her advice, just to say, hey, I see you, and if you ever want to talk, I'm here. That's it. One simple sentence. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer someone isn't solutions, it's the knowledge that they're not alone. Now press play. Here's the beautiful thing about helping other weary souls. It completes your own healing. Because when you walk alongside someone else through the valley you just came out of, you realize how far you've come. You realize that the burnout that almost destroyed you has become the very thing that qualifies you to help others. Romans 8:28 wasn't lying, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. All things, even the burnout, even the breakdown, even the years you thought were wasted. God is redeeming every bit of it. And the redemption isn't just for you, it's for everyone you help along the way. She never imagined that her mess would become her message. But that's how God works. He doesn't waste pain. He redeems it. He takes the thing that was meant to destroy you and turns it into the very thing that gives life to someone else. And when you start using your story to help other weary souls, you're not just serving them, you're honoring what God brought you through. You're saying, this didn't break me. It built me. And now I'm going to use it to build others. And that's legacy. She started noticing things she'd never had time to notice. Before: ideas, creativity, dreams she'd buried under the urgency of the urgent. One afternoon, she picked up a paintbrush for the first time in 30 years, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And as she painted, she realized, this is what margin feels like. Not laziness. Not wasted time. Space for the parts of her soul that had been suffocating under productivity. And in that space, something beautiful was growing. Margin isn't just empty space. It's fertile ground. It's where creativity lives. Where rest becomes renewal. Where you stop just surviving and start actually thriving. And the fruit of margin isn't just emotional, it's physical too. Her sleep improved. Her blood pressure dropped. Her doctor even commented, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because when your soul heals, your body follows. And when you stop living in chronic stress, your entire system recalibrates. Not overnight, but steadily, surely, undeniably. Psalm 92:12-14 says, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree, ... They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. Old age, not just youth. Old age, which means fruitfulness doesn't have an expiration date. And the fruit that comes from margin, from rest, from Sabbath, from honoring your limits, it's not hustle fruit. It's deep-rooted, sustainable, life-giving fruit. The kind that lasts. The kind that feeds others. The kind that glorifies God. This week, notice what shows up in your margin. Maybe it's a creative idea. Maybe it's a desire to reconnect with an old friend. Maybe it's just peace, which is the rarest fruit of all. Whatever it is, don't dismiss it. Don't fill the space just because it's there. Honor it, because margin isn't wasted time. It's where God does some of His best work. And the more you protect it, the more fruit you'll see. Not productivity fruit, life fruit. And there's a difference. A year into her healing, her life looked completely different. Not because she'd moved or changed jobs or made any dramatic external shifts, but because her rhythms had changed. She woke up differently, not in a panic, but in peace. She approached her day differently, not from a place of lack, but from overflow. She said yes and no, differently, not based on obligation, but on anointing. And the same God who'd been with her in the burnout, He was with her now, teaching her how to live in a completely new way. The old rhythms were hustle, prove, perform, repeat. The new rhythms were rest, receive, respond, repeat. And the difference wasn't just semantics, it was a completely different way of being alive. Because the old way required her to generate everything. The energy, the ideas, the strength, the motivation. The new way, it required her to receive everything. To wake up and say, God, what do you have for me today? And then to trust that whatever He gave would be enough. Not to accomplish everything on her list, but to accomplish everything He wanted accomplished. And that trust, It changed everything. Lamentations 3:22-23 says, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." New every morning. Which means you don't have to figure out next week today. You don't have to have next month's energy right now. You just need today's grace. And today's grace, it's already waiting, fresh, abundant, tailored exactly to what this day holds. And when you start living in that rhythm one day at a time, one grace at a time, you stop feeling overwhelmed by the future. Because you're not trying to live it all at once. You're just living today, fully present, fully provided for. Here's what I want you to try. At the end of each day, this week, before you go to bed, write down one way you saw God's faithfulness today. Not a big miracle, just one small way he showed up. Maybe it was the strength to say no when you needed to. Maybe it was an unexpected moment of joy. Maybe it was just peace when you expected anxiety. Write it down, because what you're doing is training your brain to see provision instead of lack. And over time, that practice rewires everything. You stop living from scarcity and start living from abundance. Not because your circumstances changed, but because your perspective did. The finale is coming. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss what's next. Because what she discovers in these new rhythms isn't just a better schedule. It's a completely new way of walking with God, and the peace that comes from it. It becomes her most powerful witness. People don't just see her rest, they feel it, and they want what she has. Not her life, her peace. And that peace, it's about to change everything around her. People started noticing. Not in an obvious way. She wasn't walking around with a sign that said, "I used to be burned out and now I'm healed." But there was something different about her. A calm that wasn't manufactured. A steadiness that didn't waver when things got chaotic. Her coworkers noticed it first. "How do you stay so calm?" They'd ask when deadlines were crashing and everyone else was panicking. And she'd smile and say, "I guess I've just learned that I can't control everything. So I focus on what I can." Simple words, but they came from a place of such genuine peace that people felt it. Her family noticed too. She wasn't snapping at small things anymore. Wasn't running herself ragged trying to keep everyone happy. She'd say no to hosting Thanksgiving this year. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. And instead of the guilt she expected, there was relief, because her peace gave other people permission to prioritize their own. Her daughter even said it one day over coffee. "Mom, I don't know what happened to you this past year, but you seem ... lighter, happier, like yourself again." And those words, they were worth more than any achievement she'd ever earned. 1 Peter 3:15 says, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." The hope, the peace, the calm in the chaos. And here's what she was learning. The most powerful witness isn't words, it's presence. It's the way you show up in a room and people feel safer. The way you respond to stress and it doesn't control you. The way you live from rest instead of running toward it. People can argue with your theology. They can dismiss your testimony. But they can't argue with your peace. Because peace, real peace, attracts. It draws people in. And they want to know where it comes from. Pay attention this week to who asks you about your peace. Because when someone says, "How are you so calm?" or "You seem different," that's not small talk, that's a door opening. And your answer doesn't have to be a sermon. It can be simple. "I've been learning to rest." Really rest. In God, not just in sleep. That's it. Short, honest, invitational. And for the person who's drowning in their own burnout, those words might be the lifeline they've been praying for. And here's the beautiful truth. She didn't have to market her transformation. She didn't have to post about it or announce it or prove it. She just lived it. And living it was enough. Because peace is contagious. And when you're rested, whole, and walking in sustainable rhythms, people notice. They lean in, they ask questions. In your life, you're ordinary, non-impressive. Just sewing up life becomes a sermon. The kind people actually want to hear. She sat on her back porch one Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise, and a prayer rose from somewhere deep. Lord, let my stillness glorify you, not her productivity, not her achievements, not her service, as good as those things were, her stillness, because she finally understood. God didn't need her to do more. He needed her to be more present, more whole, more connected to him, and from that being, everything else would flow, not forced, not manufactured, just flowing, like a river from the source. And as she sat there, she thought about the journey, the collapse that felt like the end, the slow, awkward healing, the Sabbaths that felt uncomfortable at first, the boundaries she learned to set, the yeses that became noes, the noes that became yeses, the community she found in vulnerability, the joy that came back, the spiritual energy that returned, the story she shared that helped others. And she realized, none of this would have happened if I hadn't burned out. The burnout wasn't punishment, it was mercy. It was God saying, stop. You're running in the wrong direction. Come back to me. Single quotes Matthew 11:28-30. The verse that started everything took on new meaning. Now, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Easy light, not because there's no work, but because you're not carrying it alone. You're yoked with Jesus, moving at his pace, resting in his rhythm. And that rhythm, it's sustainable, it's joyful, it's life. She wasn't the same woman who collapsed on the laundry room floor. She was softer, but stronger, more vulnerable, but more confident, less impressive to the world, but more aligned with God. And if you'd asked her whether she'd go through it all again, the burnout, the breakdown, the slow rebuild, she'd say yes, without hesitation, because what she gained in the ashes was worth more than anything she lost in the fire. She gained herself, she gained rest, she gained God, and that's the blessing in the burnout. Every morning now, before her feet hit the floor, she says the same prayer, Lord, keep writing, I'm still saying yes, but this time, I'm saying yes to rest, to rhythm, to you, not to the hustle, not to the performance, just to you. And that prayer, it's become her life. Not perfect, not impressive, just sustainable, just real, just hers. And in that simplicity, she's found what she was searching for all along. Peace, the kind that passes understanding, the kind that sustains through every season, the kind that comes from abiding, not achieving. And here's her final word to you, to every woman who's reading this from the edge of burnout, or the middle of it, or the other side of it. You don't have to keep running. You don't have to prove your worth through productivity. You don't have to earn rest. It's already yours. Jesus already bought it. He already gave it. And he's standing there, arms open, saying the same thing he said to her, come to me, not later, not when you've got it together. Now, as you are, weary, burdened, exhausted, come, and I will give you rest. That invitation, it's not conditional, it's not performance-based, it's just there, waiting for you. Right now, will you take it? Let's look back at where we've been. You started running on empty, exhausted, spiritually numb, hiding behind the Sunday smile. Then came the collapse, the moment everything stopped. But in that breaking, God interrupted with Matthew 11:28, come to me, and I will give you rest. You laid down the list. You rediscovered Sabbath not as ritual, but as relationship. Your first true Sabbath was imperfect, but it was the beginning. In the stillness, you heard his whisper. You found the courage to say no. You replaced hustle with grace, and learned that healing happens in the slowness. Joy returned unexpectedly. In the grocery store, in the ordinary, you found community without comparison, and your cup was refilled. Spiritual energy was restored, not adrenaline, but presence. At 58, you shared your testimony. You started helping other weary souls. Margin created space for creativity, ideas, peace. New rhythms formed, same God, different pace. Your peace became your witness. And now, Now you understand that the burnout wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The ashes became the birthplace of a new flame. And the benediction you pray every morning: Lord, let my stillness glorify you. Here's what I want you to remember. Burnout isn't failure. It's a mercy that stops you before you completely disappear. And rest isn't rebellion, it's obedience. It's trusting that God's strength is enough when yours runs out. It's believing that you're loved for who you are, not what you produce. And that love, it changes everything. So here's my challenge to you. What will you change today to move from burnout to blessing? Will you finally schedule that Sabbath morning? Will you say no to one thing that's been draining you? Will you stop performing and start being honest? Will you reach out to another weary soul and say, me too? Because here's the truth, you're not reading this by accident. God led you here because He's inviting you into rest. Real rest, soul rest. The kind that doesn't come from a vacation or a day off, but from abiding in Him. And that rest, it's yours. Today, right now, you don't have to earn it. You just have to receive it. If this message spoke to you, if you felt seen, if hope is rising, if you're ready to stop running, I want you to do 4 things. First, subscribe to this channel, because this isn't just one video. This is a community of women over 50 who are learning to live from rest instead of running toward it. Every week, we're releasing content that will encourage you, equip you, and remind you that burnout doesn't have to be your story. Don't miss what's next. Hit that subscribe button right now. Second, leave a comment. Tell me what's the one thing you need to lay down to find rest. What's the boundary you need to set? What's the yes you need to turn into a no? Because when you type it out, when you make it public, you're making a declaration. You're telling burnout it doesn't get the final word. And I promise your honesty will encourage someone else who's reading along. Third, share this video. And I want you to do it right now. Send it on WhatsApp to that woman who's running on empty. You know exactly who she is. The friend who's hiding behind the Sunday smile. The sister who's one bad day away from collapse. The woman who needs to hear that rest isn't rebellion, it's obedience. Send it to her. Tell her, this is for you. You don't have to keep running, because your obedience to share might be the mercy that saves her from her own burnout. Fourth, take one step toward rest today, not tomorrow, not when life slows down. Today, block off 1 hour on your calendar and mark it Sabbath. Turn off your phone, sit with God, do nothing productive, just be. Because what you're doing isn't wasting time, you're reclaiming your soul, and that soul, God's been waiting for you to bring it home. And one more thing before you go. The ashes of your exhaustion, they're not the end of your story. They're the birthplace of something new. A flame that burns steady, not frantic. A flame that lights the way for others. A flame that glorifies God, not through your productivity, but through your peace. And that flame, it's already been lit. You just need to tend it. With rest, with rhythm, with Him.